What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is a little bit different. We are doing another YouTube Twitch collab type thing, and normally I don't for the analysis videos, but I did actually go through the whole process of putting this together on Twitch. So for those who are curious, can always go just watch the Twitch VOD if you want to see how I go through the process of making this type of video. Twitch chat will actually be a part of this video, as you can see below the blackboard here, and we're going to do what we usually do through these videos, which is give you my opinion on Myrrh, and a couple of sample builds, and honestly a tier list at the end on where I feel. So you guys can already see my notes below me. You can see her stat spread and her weapon, plus her preference skill over there. If you don't know how or what Myrrh is, because maybe you just missed all the news, Myrrh is a new Legendary Blue Flyer Dragon for Wind Season, and she's definitely in an interesting place. I think I'll preface this by saying that dragons are in a healthier place than they used to be. As somebody who uses Legendary Tiki as one of probably my most used carry besides Ashnard, I can tell you that dragons are very functional in today's game. But they do come with a lot of caveats that can make them a bit inconsistent, and being a flying dragon is not necessarily a benefit. As you'll see at the end of the video, I will rank her compared to the other Wind Legendaries as well, so stay tuned for that, watch it through, and I will also ask Twitch chat for their opinion on whether they're going to be pulling for Myrrh or her banner or in the future. So when we get to that part of the video, maybe you'll see some walls of text down there if those of you in Twitch chat actually want to engage with it. If you enjoy this type of video, you can always watch it through. There's going to be chapters for you to skip ahead to certain parts of the videos, but if you watch it through, I appreciate it. Smashing the like button is also very important for knowing whether you like this type of video, whether you want to keep seeing this video, and subbing if you haven't already. I believe my YouTube analytics tell me that 36% of you are not subbed. So what are you doing watching a video when you're not subbed, right? We come here for the golden education. I provide that with you. Finally, if you want to support the content and keep me going for years to come, I'm not editing that out. Patreon is the best way to do that. That's in the description below, or something more personal, which is coaching. I coach many people on a weekly basis, new players or people that are going to go from never playing AR, never playing Summoner Duels, and straight to Vault of Heavens and the higher ranks. If you want to put these type of units like Myrrh, your favorites, to the best, I can help you do that. All right, that's it. Let's talk about Myrrh. So, on my first impression for Myrrh, her stat spread is actually quite unimpressive, actually. I feel it's very similar to Ashnard, but I do use Ashnard, so that does tell me that a stat spread like this is functional. As a melee tank, I think Myrrh will shine, meaning combining her with Far Save is going to do you a lot of well. I don't cover Omni tank builds with Myrrh in this particular video, but I do think that can also work depending on what sort of supports you pair her up with, such as Kaden, Duo Hilda, NY Valoria, Fallen Ninian. These are all pretty good partners that you can highly consider for Myrrh as well. Her weapon gives, and her C-skill give a lot of nice goodies that I feel are quite relevant in today's game, which is of course denying follow-ups, having an auto-double, having damage reduction in her weapon itself, it's slaying, and there is a 2-space clause, but there's also a unit initiation clause, which is usually not found in dragons. So something I didn't list in my notes below is that she does have a decent player phase, and we'll discuss that in one of the later builds in a moment, but she has a decent player phase that I think isn't something you consider for most dragons because of breadth skills, and you know, everyone mostly thinks like there isn't really much player phase dragons in the game. I think your only player phase dragons are the Liliths, really. There's a couple I've probably missed, but those ones stick out to me the most. So Myrrh does have a player phase, but where she does shine and bring something new to the table is her preference C skill, which is Darkly Guardian, and that provides a warp bubble. So the warp bubble is pretty much the same thing as what Gatekeeper uses, and it denies, most notably, stuff like ground orders or Bridal Catria's jump-in type effects, where you can really deny the space that something on an air defense could threaten you with. However, her being a Wind Legendary, I think is going to have a lot of problems, and Elamine existing also means that Myrrh just doesn't really line up in the seasons that she might be the most functional. And what I mean by this is if Astra Wind season lines up and you use Elamine, Elamine will already do the function of shutting down Bridal Catria type teams that you'll find on defense. So Myrrh, while she might be a pretty good tank, I think will just kind of not really shine as to what makes her unique, which is her preference C skill. Now in light season though, I think she's quite good. If the wind light seasons line up for air offense, that is quite good for her, and that is where I think she's going to shine the most as a melee type tank, providing that warp bubble without necessarily having to use Gatekeeper. So anti-meta for sure. That's with that in mind. However, a lot of these new unit releases clearly are designed with Summoner Duels in mind, and I'm not going to go past this video without mentioning that Myrrh herself in Summoner Duels will be very relevant, because post Kanto control, I feel like every single team that you're going to run into in Summoner Duels, especially Summoner Duels R, has a Bridal Catria, or at least 90% of them do. So Myrrh with Warp Bubble there is going to be very strong, especially if you combine Warp Bubble and Capital Control. And honestly, the whole Summoner Duels meta just always changing, ever changing. And if that's a reason for you to summon, you probably have a lot of excess orbs, or your wallet might be a bit too big. Either way, these new units definitely consider Summoner Duels meta in mind and how it keeps changing all the time. So that's a huge resource sink that I could never recommend going for. In terms of scoring, she's equivalent to Legendary Sigurd and Legendary Micaiah, so it's pretty good, but it's nothing new and groundbreaking at all. Her base kit is notably also pretty good. I think out of the box, you would be pretty impressed with how you use her. Defense Res Unity, Dragon Wall, and Darkling Guardian are pretty good. If you were to make some budget adjustments, I'd recommend just swapping out her special for like Noontime, keeping Unity. I think Defense Res Unity is actually quite good. For tanks, you want some sort of Unity, or you want your other units to soak Dark Shrines or Bright Shrines, or whatever stat spread ends up being a problem. So Myrrh is very high defense and res, especially once you consider in blessings from Aether Raids from the mythics, should bump her defense and res to very high numbers, that especially with summoner support as well, merges, flowers, and whatnot, she's going to end up taking the defense res type stuff from Dark Shrines, chill defense and res for sure, and defense res unity is a great A skill to just keep for that reason. Dragon Wall, I think, is a bit awkward with her weapon, to be honest, especially when you run into Deadeye lethality type effects. However, if you use her with far save, you don't really have to care about this, since there aren't many units that pierce through melee damage. So Dragon Wall plus her weapon giving her damage reduction is quite good against a lot of melee matchups, because if you combine her with far save, she shouldn't be running into Deadeyes and lethalities. She just has to worry about stuff like Flavia, I guess, and Legendary Nana. Those are like the two that come to mind that will pierce damage reduction. But otherwise, when it comes to melee threats, you've got that damage reduction for sure. So yeah, as for the seal, it's pretty flexible. Kind of depends on your other units, but I do think giving her speed is a good idea, because with speed, you're going to overcome a lot of the foes that might be running stuff like impact effects, worry fighters, or just deny auto doubles in general. And you just want her speed to get somewhere in the like 40s or so, or 50s, depending on Peony, Elamine, Plumeria, whoever you have providing extra speed, or even a speed IV, are all really good ideas. So I think giving her speed in the form of attack speed solo, Kestrel stance, attack speed form are all great options in the seal. You could technically run something like QR as well for the double auto double, but I think giving her extra attack and speed is a solid way to just go about doing this. Yeah, so that's what I'd say for budget. If you did spark her, or were planning to, or already did, she definitely can find some use as a melee tank for sure, combined with far save. Now, if you're going to invest in her a little bit more, I do think subbing out the B skill for another skill, such as the Dragon set of skills, so Dragon's Ire, Dragon's Wrath, could also work pretty well. But as somebody who uses a flyer tank, and I'm talking about Ashnard, I feel like Trace is so good to use. And despite there not being a res near Trace, and sorry, that just she'd prefer it because when you're taking melee matchups, you're not hitting defense, you're hitting res, it doesn't adapt, but there isn't really much better. So I do think that 18 year trace is actually quite good because the way you can use it is very flexible. You can reposition an ally, get 3 movement, you can get more than 2 movement because the res, the trace gives you remaining movement +1, so it's a good way to actually get 3 movement or getting into a better position. Combined with far saves, you can really get into these otherwise impossible type scenarios. And even though the trace may not be ideal, it still does give you attack -3 on top of that to make her even bulkier. So subbing out Dragon Wall is not really a big deal, but the other dragon skills plus the trace skills I think are the biggest change you can make on the B skill. If you feel like she's missing kills, then subbing out Noontime for something like Glimmer is also an alternative. But yeah, so this is what I kind of think about Myrrh so far. As you can see, chat below me might also be giving their opinions as well, and I do want to hear what you guys have to think, say and think in the comments below. If you've already summoned for her, please let me know and why. I'm sure a lot of people just like Myrrh. She is, it's Myrrh. Not really more to say. But the last thing here that I want to touch on is actually the tier list and where we stand now post Myrrh. So post Myrrh, this is where I feel about the Wind Legendaries. And before you start raising your pitchforks, at least hear me out. So this is a general tier list, and a general tier list is hard to cover because there's still going to be situations where someone like Lyn, who's even at the bottom here, could potentially be better than Sigurd. And I am really grasping at straws to say something like that, but as a general tier list, this means that these units can be good in different game modes beyond just Arena. Now, they are designed with Arena in mind, Colosseum with the high scoring on their dual skills and such, but now we definitely can use a lot of these legendaries outside of that for air defense, for air offense, for Arena, Colosseum modes, and now Summoner Duels. So I think looking at these characters from a broader spectrum is quite useful. And with that being said, I want to go over the legendaries as well and why I put them in their positions and where you can find use for them. We will talk about Lyn, of course, but let's start with Sigurd. Now, Sigurd rightfully deserves top tier and his own tier for that matter because he just brings pretty much, if there anything can come as to being as broken in this game as possible, Sigurd is pretty much knocking on the door of that, because Sigurd has just too many mechanics that are unique to him, that define how you play into him, whether that's in air defense, whether that's Summoner Duels, it doesn't matter. He scores really well. He's pretty much used in every game mode, and he's really good for that. Holy Knight Aura, notably, is still the only way to make a range cav have 4 movement. He has a slaying weapon with quick impulse, so he can just activate that really easily. On top of that, you can give him Trace instead of Crusader's Ward, and he has so many flexible builds and so many different ways you can use him, whether that's in Gale Force and air offense, air defense, as just this 4 movement type cav that just enables everyone. Summoner Duels, and you have to consider how you play around him. There's just too much to say about Sigurd, and rightfully deserves his place. If there's one recommendation I would make for a Wind Legendary and you don't have one, it would be Sigurd. But in a very, very close second place, I would say Legendary Lucina is still pretty much the queen. If Sigurd is the king, then Lucina is the queen. Now, Lucina isn't miles better than stuff like Micaiah, Byleth, or Myrrh for that matter. Maybe she's probably a lot better than Myrrh, but Lucina's future vision is definitively what makes Lucina in that second place here. Future vision and unique mechanics age really well in this game. Holy Knight Aura, future vision, change fade if you look at all the Chroms, and of course if we talked about Legendary Chrom, you would know exactly why Lucina is in second place here. The one drawback that I would give Lucina is unfortunately that she doesn't score well. So she sticks out like a sore thumb because unfortunately with B dual infantry, she's only 175. So in terms of scoring and Colosseum, she will hold you back. But for every other game mode, she does work. And I mean everything, air offense, defense, Summoner Duels, and of course in Colosseum and PvE modes, Future Vision is just so powerful and quite synergistic with so many different team comp options as well, because it does have that Pelagian type effect, so she can be quite a strong nuke with everything else being said. Now on an AR defense, combined with like a Catria Ball, Future Vision can punish Catria Ball's biggest weakness, being hit and run type strategies, and Lucina has quite good nuking potential post refine, of course. So yeah, it's just there's not much more to say. She's pretty much the wind season version of Chrom, and if you play into Future Vision, you'll know that it is hard to deal with, but if you use it, you'll feel glad and happy you have it. Now, Micaiah and Byleth, I'm going to kind of consider pretty similar here. Byleth is more mobile, while Micaiah, in my opinion, is a bigger nuker. And I've used Micaiah quite extensively myself. She is great as a PvE type unit and just cleanup. And her weapon having desperation of 50% is something I underrated initially when I was analyzing her. And now that I've used her quite a bit, I think she's one of the best PvE queens, but can work really well as a tank type unit. So Byleth and Micaiah, great as both type nuker type units. I think Micaiah has better matchup spreads, being colorless of course, but you can't really go wrong with either. They just don't have that unique mechanic that of course Lucina has. Finally, with Myrrh's release here, I don't think she's necessarily as good as Lucina, Micaiah, or Byleth, but she's definitely not as bad as bad, but not worse than Gunther or Legendary Eliwood or anyone below. Now, Myrrh is very specific in how you'd want to use her. I think she just really wants to be a tank type unit and really well in like melee tank or just being anti-meta in general. But being seasonal locked is probably a big drawback of her, and that is the whole I want to use her all the time in AR offense, but unfortunately it's not win season type thing, is just really inconvenient for using her. People use Legendary Sigurd off-season just because he's that powerful, but with Myrrh, you can't really afford to use her off-season in AR offense. You will just get, it will just affect your scoring way too much in comparison. Now, the Sigurd and A tiers, definitely the strongest legendaries right now, but if we're going to go talk about the lower tiers, we got to be far more specific, and that is unfortunately what makes them far more specific. Gunther and Eliwood are both very supportive, very strong type characters. I feel like Eliwood has still aged really well by being able to provide long-range buffs and a bonus doubler effect. He's also due for a weapon refine, being the first wind pair-up legendary. It will be fairly soon-ish, so he's going to be in a good spot once that happens. Gunther is very strong as a nuker, and her Chilling Seal has so many effects on it for debuffs that I think is notable. But what is also really good is that Gunther with G-Dual Cavalry 4 still scores pretty well even by today's standards, and being a range cav despite not using Trace can still open up a lot of doors to make your arena experience a lot easier. Now, jumping into the lower tiers with Corrin and Hrid, being a melee unit is suffering. Hrid is just a circumstance of not being Sigurd. He has debuff utility that I think is really good, but trenches really hurt him badly. He can't use Trace without taking a score hit or taking away his support capabilities, and unfortunately that is all you can really say about Hrid. He's just a melee cav. You look at someone like Corrin and you just have very binary usage being a tank. Now as an Omni tank, I do think Corrin is quite good, especially with access to a lot of dragon skills and negating Fang and supports from allies. She can definitely run a sort of Omni tank or maybe even melee tank presence, but that is very limiting and she doesn't have any support capability at all. So I don't feel very strongly about Corrin, and I am speaking as someone who is a Legendary Corrin user. I genuinely use someone like Legendary Tiki way more than I use Corrin, and I even have probably some better experiences using Fjorm, and I'm talking OG Fjorm, sometimes even better than Corrin. She has aged pretty poorly for 2 years that she's been out. Finally, for the few minutes I'll spend on Lyn here, Lyn is usable in air defense on a Catria wall, and that is literally it. Maybe some PV units, some PV usage, maybe, and I guess maybe Summoner Duels, but I gotta be honest, she's completely outclassed by so many different units in these roles. Even looking directly in the Wind Legendary categories, I would much rather put Legendary Micaiah on a Catria wall than Legendary Lyn. I definitely would put Lucina over Lyn. It's just, there's way too much competition and there's just way better options than using someone like Lyn in pretty much every mode. The biggest detriment, of course, is in Arena, in Colosseum, the mode that she is designed for, you cannot even use the skill which increases her scoring, G Dual Cavalry 4, I mean, she's not a cav, G Dual Infantry 4, without taking away her greatest strength, which is her preference A skill. So all of these compounding factors put her in a solid bottom place, and I'm not changing my opinion on that, but if you want to, go ahead and tell me why you disagree in the comments below. I'll still read it, and I'll probably even comment and respond to it. And notably, maybe even like some of the stuff I read with especially with Lynn. It's always great. All right, finally, now usually I spend the end of this video with a community should you poll video, and life's just been pretty busy in a good way. Just been doing a lot of stuff and trying to get around to these videos, so more to come. But with the current video, I wanted to actually give Twitch chat an opportunity here to say what they did. So a little bit of community, which is Twitch chat, this is your time. Let me know, is Myrrh worth pulling for, or are you going to be saving for Myrrh in the future? All right. So, yep. I'd say that the sentiment I'm getting from a lot of people is that Myrrh is not worth it. We do have Legendary Sheeta, Myrrh, and I believe Byleth's sharing, which is a pretty good share. However, Byleth and Myrrh both being wind probably takes away the goodness of the blue here in this banner. So while there are some very good recent units, I don't necessarily think that Myrrh here is even worth considering. Maybe some good fodder, something like Distant Storm off Legendary Sheeta could definitely be good for some sort of favorite or tank unit they might have. But yeah, guys, that pretty much covers my Legendary Myrrh analysis and thoughts. Feel free to let me know in the comments below what you think. If you haven't already smashed the like button, please do so. And if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. See you in the next one very soon. Peace.